Okay, so let's talk about the carnivore diet. What's your definition of a carnivore diet? What does it include and what does it not include? Because there are hundreds of variations out there. There are even people who argue about whether you should have the dairy in there or not, or whether it should be eggs included or eggs excluded. I'm interested in your opinion. What is the carnivore diet?
So look, a carnivore diet is still a subset of being ketogenic. It's still a ketogenic diet. So we have two metabolic states. We can be in the metabolic state of glycolysis, where we burn glucose for fuel, or we can be in the metabolic state of ketosis, where we burn fat for fuel and produce ketones. So when you live a carnivore lifestyle, regardless of which version of carnivore you look at, we are ketogenic. So keto and carnivore is the same thing. Now, the variation comes in regards to, if we look at a definition of a ketogenic lifestyle, it will say that 70% of your calories are to come from fats and, 20 to 25 from proteins and 5 to 10 from carbohydrate, for example. And that's fine. That's a version of the same lifestyle. I don't agree with those ratios because I believe that we should be predominant in animal proteins. Yet, if you begin that lifestyle and it confers a benefit, then fantastic. Coming back to right at the other end of the scale, low carb. If you become low carb, you're going to be fitter and healthier. The two biggest levers that we can pull in health and well-being are to remove the grains and to stop consuming seed oils. So if you only ever do those two things, you're going to be a lot fitter and healthier. Excuse me. Those are the two most damaging compounds on the planet in regards to diet. So if there's only two things you do that. The next thing on the list for me is making sure that you consume enough animal proteins, because when you consume animal proteins, you consume the fats. So can you see how slowly, as you said, it's these incremental changes? You start with just lowering carb, and then you start to look at the grains, then you start to look at the seed oils, then you realize that animal proteins are where the nutrients are coming from. So this gravitation slowly, these incremental changes and becoming more animal-based, if you like. There are so many different versions of being carnivore, and they're all very good, and the one that works the best is whichever allows you to maintain the lifestyle, unless you suffer with other issues. And what I mean by this is, if you consume 70 to 80% of, I don't like using the term calories, but I'm gonna use this because this is what the listeners understand. A calorie doesn't really exist in the sense that we believe it to, but that's probably a call for another day. But if we were to consume 70 to 80% of our energy, then let's use the term energy, from animal proteins, then I believe that's a carnivore lifestyle. You are carnivore if you were doing this. When you start to go deeper down the rabbit hole, you'll see people on the forums that will say, this isn't carnivore because you're still consuming X amount from plant. You're still consuming coffee, which, is a bean, for example, or you're still adding onions to your burgers or whatever it is. If you were living that lifestyle and you were thriving, then that's fantastic. Can you be fitter? Can you be healthier? Are there more levers to pull? There are always more levers to pull. So carnivore then starts to go down the route of being predominantly meats, eggs, fish, and cheese, for example, and maybe sort of milk in the form of A2 milk, if you want to put that in. A2 milk can still cause intestinal permeability. So A2 milk, and we know this from studies with the Maasai and the Akikuyu, that casein can still cause intestinal permeability. So for me, milk doesn't work, even A2. But if you were gravitating into this lifestyle and you want to consume goat's milk, which is A2, for example, or you want to consume A2 cow's milk, if that's helping you maintain the journey, fantastic. If consuming a little bit of Greek yogurt allows you to maintain the journey, then fantastic. If cheese allows you to maintain the journey, fantastic. Now, the thing with these compounds in regards to cheese and dairy is they're high in casomorphin, which is highly addictive. and it can cause this intestinal permeability. So people with severe autoimmune issues find that they can't eat cheese, they can't consume Greek yogurt, and they can't consume milk. And that's fine. So you gravitate deeper down this journey. And what we want to try to predominate is ruminant animals. So this is beef and lamb. I believe lamb to be more beneficial than beef because lamb is always grass-fed, but beef is still fantastic. Now, if you were living a carnivore-based lifestyle, you still may be consuming chicken and pork, for example. You may be consuming fish. I eat fish. I think fish is fantastic. You may be consuming coffee. You may be consuming eggs. If you were doing these things and you were thriving, then fantastic. This is brilliant. If you find that you were still suffering with some problems of autoimmune issues, if you're having flare-ups, if you're suffering with aches and pains, then what I would suggest to do in that instance is to do a full elimination protocol. And this would be just consuming beef and lamb with salt and water. Because doing this allows you to eliminate any potential other compound which can be found in things like eggs, coffee, chicken, pork. In eggs, it's a compound called overmucoid. This can cause autoimmune issues. This can cause a negative response for some people. Shellfish, it can cause problems. Fish in general can cause problems with some people. Chicken that's grain-fed can cause problems with some people. Pork, because it has a higher linoleic acid content, can cause problems. And all of these things do depend on where they come from and what they're fed. But what I would suggest is be strict with beef and lamb. Eat as much of it as you want, and then start to reintroduce certain compounds. So you can maybe put the coffee back in. And if this flare up or these issues come back, then you know the coffee is the contributing factor. Now, the reason we do it this way is that when we start to reduce the amount of foods that we've got the choice from, we begin to eat more of what's left. And what we find in the carnivore community is that it isn't just one compound. So it may just not be eggs that's causing the problem. It may be eggs and coffee, or it may be eggs and chicken. So what happens is if we remove the eggs, we eat more chicken because that's what's left on the menu, you know? And that could be a contributing factor. So the best protocol, remove everything, become incredibly strict, then reintroduce. But ultimately, you know, this lifestyle is whatever allows you to be consistent. So you and I, you know, a carnivore. I'm sure lots of your listeners are low carb. I'm sure lots of them are ketogenic, and that's fantastic. But what you do find, as you say, is you do find you'll gravitate deeper down the journey. But, you know, if you need to consume some plant compound just to keep the variety going, that's fine. Do that because the consistency is key. If you need to indulge in, you know, keto bars or these other items that are found on the market that may, and look, in an ideal world, we wouldn't consume any of these compounds. But if doing that prevents you from consuming a Mars bar, then that is going to be a net gain. So that's a positive, and that allows you to maintain the journey. In an ideal world, we would be strict carnivore, and we would be consuming nothing but beef and lamb with salt and water. But personally, this is what I'll tell you what I eat. So I eat lots of beef, grass-fed lamb. I eat chicken maybe once a week. I eat pork maybe once a week. I do eat eggs. I alternate the eggs, so I don't eat them every day, but I do consider. So I haven't eaten eggs for a few weeks, but sometimes I eat lots of eggs. I do still consume cheese. Cheese in moderation works well for me, so I consume little bits of cheese. And as a treat, now and again, I'll eat a Greek yogurt. So now and again, a little bit of Greek yogurt for me is highly indulgent. And you know, there are far worse things to be consuming than if consuming a Greek yogurt or a piece of cheese now and again is all you have to worry about, then there is very little else to worry about. But this is very much of an individual approach, because if you do suffer with autoimmune issues, then there are specific compounds, as we mentioned, that you will ideally want to try to navigate. But you know, it's as simple as this. I don't like pigeonholing. This is about healthy living. So this word, you know, keto, I don't teach a keto lifestyle. I don't teach a carnivore lifestyle. I teach healthy living, and healthy living comes back to always animal proteins and natural fats. If that's the base of your diet, then you are always going to be in a better position than if you predominated, other so-called said foods from the supermarket.
I love that message very much, Richard, and I completely agree with that. And from what you explained, it is a spectrum. And if you want to be very strict carnivore, perhaps even the lion diet, then that kind of means that you probably have some issues and you want to sort them out. But not everyone who's on a low carb diet has severe autoimmune issues.
Exactly.
So it is a spectrum. In fact, I've had a guest on this channel who's a carnivore coach, and she gave 3 definitions of the carnivore diet. She said, look, there are categories of it. You can be moderate, you can be strict, and you can be, what was the other one, relaxed. And so it's, anywhere, if you're consuming, if 70% to 80% of your diet consists of animal foods, then you are a carnivore. That's how she put it. And it's incredibly, it makes it simple. It makes it relatable. And anyone can then think, okay, so that, the salad that I had on the weekend doesn't mean I'm no longer a carnivore, because that was the only vegetable I had in the week. So
exactly. I was out for food recently, and something came that I ordered in. So what did I order? I can't remember what it was, but I specifically asked for. So I had a beef dish. I'm always very sure that I mention to the restaurant that I'm allergic. So I tell them I'm allergic to vegetable oil, so they don't cook in vegetable oil. I ordered some, I think it was king prawns, and it came in a sauce with some greenery with it. And I thought, I know that the sauce was made from vegetable oils. And I knew because my stomach is highly sensitive, and it had a little bit of greenery on it, but the greenery was it was stuck to these king prawns, and I tried scraping as much of it off, but there was still bits on there. And I remember eating this, thinking that if anybody saw me now, they would be saying, that's not carnivore. And look, you don't need to be that dogmatic with things. It's the beauty is when you live this lifestyle, we are incredibly healthy, and our bodies have the ability to cope with any toxin that we put in at that amount. And that's an important thing to remember, because you don't have to be as strict as I am. You don't have to be as strict as you are. It's whatever works best for you, but always predominate your animal proteins. And if you're out for a meal one day and you want to indulge, then give yourself the right to do that. You're not cheating. This is your life. You can eat whatever you like. And somebody once said to me, when I was out for food, you can't eat this. That's what they said to me, because you're on keto. And my answer to that was, I can eat whatever I want. I can eat whatever I want. Today, I'm making the choice. I'm making the decision not to eat that compound. Tomorrow, if I want to eat that compound, I will eat it and I'll enjoy it. But tomorrow comes and I don't want to eat that compound. No, but knowing that it's your choice in regards to what you eat. It's not that you can't eat these foods. It's our choice not to eat them because they are damaging our body. Enjoy the food that you eat. The carnivore lifestyle, the ketogenic lifestyle, is full of abundant animal proteins. Go to your local butcher. You'll be amazed of how many different cuts that you can choose from, how many different ways that you can eat your food. It's a highly indulgent lifestyle. Last night I had steak, and I was talking to a client today, and they said to me, well, what did you have with it? And I said, well, that was it. I just had steak and salt. It was a massive cut of steak. It was that thick. The fat around the edge was this thick, and it was absolutely incredible. I didn't need anything else with it. But when I was gravitating into this sort of way of eating, I needed a little bit of sauce or a little bit of mayonnaise and a little bit of seasoning, and something else, maybe a bit of greenery to allow me to do that. And that's fine, because that allowed me to make these incremental changes towards being carnivore. I didn't wake up yesterday being carnivore. I've gravitated into this through many years of incremental changes. And that's the best advice I think I can give to anybody is don't just jump straight in the deep end unless you suffer with severe autoimmune issues. Give yourself time to gravitate slowly, and it will make the process way, way, way more easier.
Excellent. I can't let you go, Richard, without asking about organ meats. So are the organs absolutely necessary? Because a lot of people, well, I struggle with, I just can't swallow any liver.
Yeah.
Do I need supplements? Because
No,
I'm not
not at all.
liver?
Not at all. So look, organ meats are highly nutrient dense. They are the most nutrient dense foods on the planet. Beef liver, lamb liver, highly nutrient dense. We don't need much of, beef liver, for example, because the nutrients are so abundant within them. If we heart, for example, incredibly high in coenzyme Q10, kidney contains diamine oxidase, which is incredibly useful for combating histamine issues. So these foods are highly nutrient dense. But if we look at a piece of beef, for example, and we compare 100 grams of beef to 100 grams of beef liver, then beef liver beats the beef hands down. But you don't just eat 100 grams of beef. We'll eat 500 grams or more in my case. I mean, I eat probably over 1 kilogram of beef a day. So when we factor in those nutrients within there and multiply them by 10, there are far more nutrients in there comparative to the 100 grams of organ meats that we would consume, for example. So if you can incorporate organ meats, fantastic. If you can't, it doesn't matter. As long as we're consuming beef and lamb in particular, I'm on a mission lately to promote lamb because this whole grass-fed beef thing comes from the States. As you know, lamb doesn't predominate as much in the States as lamb does. But when we look at the vitamin and mineral ratio in lamb and the fat content in regards to omega-3 ratio, lamb is far more nutrient dense because it's always grass fed. So lamb and beef are the way forward. And that's what I tend to predominate over anything else. But organ meats are not essential. You do not need to supplement with something. You're not going to be devoid of anything. There are plenty of nutrients found in animal proteins as you would eat, as nature intended.